The debate around enforcing immigration hits home. President Donald Trump wants Harvard University to pay $1 billion, and America's talking with Firearms Friday. This is the Center Square Daily for Friday, February 6th, 2026. I'm your host, Greg Bishop. Thank you for joining us each and every weekday for the Center Square Daily. Well, the countdown continues for members of Congress to come to terms for a funding deal for the Department of Homeland Security after passage of a continuing resolution earlier this week. The 2-week clock for debates around reforms to immigration enforcement are ongoing. Now, Republicans, they're rejecting many of the demands being made by Democrats. In a story you'll find at thecentersquare.com, Republicans say it's ridiculous, the 10 different demands from Democrats for DHS reforms. Among those, you have no masks, targeted enforcement, requiring ICE officials to have ID, protecting sensitive locations, stopping racial profiling, uphold use of force standards, ensuring state and local coordination oversight. They also want to have safeguards built into the system, plus body cameras and no paramilitary police. Now, the body cam provision was agreed upon by the Department of Homeland Security, with President Donald Trump saying that he sees body cameras as being, quote, 80% good for law enforcement. But is that going to be enough to have the Democrats walk back from some of their other requirements they say are needed for immigration enforcement? Now, the debate about all of this, not just happening in the halls of Congress, but it has hit home with the public sounding off on such issues. We've seen this pop up in Chicago during city council meetings in the previous years of certain individuals getting up critical of city officials and how they've handled the immigration situation. We've also seen it in Minneapolis and Los Angeles and elsewhere. Now, last night in Philadelphia, the city council there approved a resolution urging Pennsylvania's members of Congress to oppose increased ICE funding. But that didn't happen until they heard from public comments. Some of them were supportive of the resolution and opposed to ICE, saying that there is fear in the city of Pennsylvania's district of Philadelphia.
That fear is being driven by the unlawful and inhumane actions of ICE. We have seen families separated, people detained without judicial warrants, and individuals harmed or killed in custody. These practices undermine constitutional protections and make all of us less safe.
Now, on those streets of Philadelphia, others saying they support ICE, and actually, that's exactly what they voted for.
Woe to you that continually saying the ICE out, because in these streets, it's being interpreted as illegal immigrants is in. And that this council cares more about illegal immigrant than the American citizens in this city. Woe to you, elected officials, hypocrites.
When we talk about ICE, when 78 million people, 7 swing states, including Pennsylvania, we voted for this. We voted for this. We gave a mandate. We want to fund to deport 20 million illegal aliens that was imported in here by the Biden and Harris administration with the help of the cartels. So won't y'all stand up for Americans for once? Because America comes first.
Now, the mixed outpour of opinion from the public comments didn't change the vote in the Philadelphia City Council. They did approve that resolution last night, urging for members of Congress from Pennsylvania to oppose any increase in ICE funding. But as that clock continues in Congress to debate reforms to ICE, the Center Square will be monitoring that ongoing and developing story. Now we take a look at higher education, with Harvard's diversity, equity, and inclusion policies continuing to be a problem for President Donald Trump. Joining us now is the Center Square's education reporter, Esther Wickham. Esther, you've got the continued reporting here about the president seeking that $1 billion. What's at stake here and what's behind all of this?
Yeah, thanks, Greg. So just like you said, President Trump, as soon as he entered into office, really had this high priority of, really keeping higher education accountable. And when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion, looking into and investigating various schools and seeing where is all this federal funding going? what are taxpayers actually putting towards when it comes to these college students? And specifically, we're seeing across the board with a ton of Ivy League schools, just like Harvard University, that essentially they are allegedly violating what the Trump administration's efforts have kind of gone after. And we've seen a lot of Title IX violations, Title VI violations when it comes to anti-discrimination laws. And according to the Trump administration, they are really trying to crack down on this, especially since the ongoing war in the Gaza Strip is continuing and debates are rising around that. A lot of protests have happened on education campuses. So the Trump administration is kind of coming after the federal funding and saying, you must cease these protests and you must cease this hostility, specifically towards Jewish students. They're experiencing anti-Semitic actions against them. And so the Trump administration has kind of used federal funding as a leverage to make them stop.
Now, of course, Harvard's at central here. Some other universities complying with the president's executive orders, others maybe changing the name of their office a little bit. We'll look at the timeline of Harvard here over the past year in a moment, but I wanted to get your reaction to White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt yesterday being asked about the president wanting to get $1 billion from Harvard. Here's that clip.
The president said he's now seeking $1 billion from Harvard, considerably more than before. What changed here, and how are negotiations going?
Well, look, this has been an ongoing negotiation and, frankly, a frustrating negotiation for the president and the administration because we want a deal. And it's very unfortunate that Harvard has dragged its feet in understanding they need to rectify the wrongs and the illegal behavior that took place on their campus over the course of the past several years under the previous administration. And so the president wants a justified deal to correct for that criminal behavior that took place on their campus. He is now demanding $1 billion from Harvard University, and Secretary McMahon will be continuing to lead this negotiation and these talks.
Esther, your thoughts on the negotiations and the talks? The president's been in office now for 12 months. Are they making any progress with Harvard?
Yeah, just like Caroline said, this negotiation started as soon as he jumped into office. And specifically in September, the Trump administration kind of threatened that $500 million request on top of withholding, over, $2 million. And essentially, Harvard hasn't really budged. The current president of Harvard, Alan Garber, has said multiple times, will attempt to comply, but ultimately this is the students' First Amendment rights to protest and to fight against, whatever they believe is true when it comes specifically to the war in Gaza. But looking at, this uptick in the funding that the Trump is requesting from $500 to $1 billion, this is clearly a failure, according to them, on Harvard's part to respond. And the previous president that stepped down of Harvard, Claudine Gay, criticized the administration many times, saying that this proposal requesting the university to hand back money over, as they claim, First Amendment rights is, quote, arbitrary and unjustified. And so, I think aside from even the DEI claims, when looking even at transgender policies, it seems like Harvard University is kind of sticking their feet in the ground, and it'll be interesting to see how this continues because there hasn't been a lot of, response from them.
And we're talking about, tax dollars here involved. And I mean, just think about since 2020 through COVID, all the billions of dollars that went to universities during the pandemic. Plus, you've got the ongoing funding lines for higher ed coming from state houses and the federal government. So there's a lot of money involved here. Obviously, Harvard's just one of these. But I did want to get up on the screen here a timeline of what we've seen from your reporting and others at the Center Square when it comes to President Trump being in office. In January, first day, he signed an executive order ending racial and wasteful government DEI programs and preferencing. February through April, some colleges removed their DEI programs and requirements. In April, Trump froze $2.2 billion from Harvard, and Harvard sued. In May, Harvard changes their DEI program to community and campus life. But apparently that didn't assuage the Trump administration because they still moved to cut federal contracts from Harvard. In the summer, the president threatened all federal funds from Harvard. And then in September, as you reported, Esther, a federal judge orders Trump to give back that Harvard funding. What's the next phase of this? Because it almost feels like it's just starting to ramp up, even after 12 months of dealing with this question.
Yeah, I mean, just like you said, in December, the U.S. District Court judge from Massachusetts kind of blocked that order from Trump in regards to, freezing that federal funding over a conflict, again, of First Amendment protections. And just like you said, this is happening all across the board, even though we have some universities like Cornell, Columbia, UPenn complying and, spending or, giving back that money to the administration or complying with other, programs. It's kind of hard to quantify if they're actually following through, because just like you said, they kind of changed the label, or, these workers are still in the university. So it's hard to figure out who's actually complying and who's not. And I think it will be interesting to see how the university responds. I've reached out to the university many times and haven't gotten a response back. And so I think that they're definitely keeping a low profile and not trying to respond in any way. And so it doesn't look like this specific university is going to change course anytime. But it kind of seems like the district courts are on their side when it comes to, First Amendment protections and, next steps going forward. They don't really see how freezing this federal funding is going to, as they say, quote, end anti-Semitism within the university.
And again, tax dollars at stake here, and a lot of money going to these universities. And the arguments have been made in the past 12 months, well, these universities need financing to help with health research, to make advances in medical science, or, they need to help lower, advantaged students to have access to education and a whole host of other things. But again, Harvard, a private university, it's not a public school. And they've got a huge endowment. All of these other universities have huge endowments. So certainly there's a part of this conversation that's going to work that in as well. I imagine we've got a lot more to go here. But Esther, as you said, some universities seemingly to comply. In Wisconsin, our investigator for the Center Square, Jared Strong, has this story. Wisconsin University closes its DEI unit, but keeps most staff working on equity issues. And Jared's story finds that the program's employed about 100 people, earning $7 million annually. And the university had no grasp of its total diversity spending and whether it was effective. And auditors identified problems with employee bonuses, travel, and other expenses in the division. This seems to be a lot more to this story than just the spat between Trump and Harvard.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, within this story, it specifically highlights that they employed about 100 people, within this DEI achievement sector, and they were earning over $7 million annually. And that is all taxpayer funded. And, Greg, aside from higher education, we're also seeing this within the K through 12 education sector, specifically, schools in California, the administration kind of coming after them per se with these threats of withholding funding and them seemingly complying, but them still, not actually following through. Once you look into it and investigate it, they just kind of change the name, or, if professors are not allowed to teach certain DEI requirements, they just change the name of the coursework. And as soon as students go into that classroom, they're like, oh, wait, this is not what I signed up for. And so it's kind of interesting to see how a lot of universities have either, they haven't taken the extreme side of accepting or rejecting it. They're kind of in this gray area where they say they'll comply just to get that federal funding, because a lot of universities do, thrive off of that, but they're actually not complying when you look super close into it. And so the Center Square and a lot of our investigative reporters are doing good work to kind of expose that, and we'll kind of see how the Trump administration responds to it.
Esther Wickham, education reporter for the Center Square. Greatly appreciate your work, and we'll be checking in with you again soon for the Center Square Daily.
Thanks, Greg.
All right, now for America's Talking Firearms Friday, and a lot of activity across the country in state houses that we're going to take a look at here. In Virginia, after the Virginia Senate has already approved and advanced a bill that could lead to a ban on semi-automatic firearms in that state, the House debating what to do with gun transfers. Here's Delegate Ren Williams asking a bill sponsor just about that question.
And then this bill right here, this actually makes it a state crime to sell a firearm to a firearm dealer. It says you cannot transfer it to any person, and there is no exception to allowing a dealer to purchase a firearm from you. The only exceptions that are in there is the dealer is able to sell to each other and to law enforcement. So the government can keep their guns, but you can't.
Again, that's an interesting debate there from Virginia. Meanwhile, close by in Georgia, State Representative Chuck Efstration, he talked about how he's looking to get weapons detection systems into Georgia's school systems.
This does not apply to entrances that remained locked or equipped with alarms and are not intended for daily use, such as emergency exits. As a practicing attorney, just in my everyday life, when I'm going into the courthouse, I'm used to passing through courthouse security, which includes a weapons detection system. It's just part of my everyday life, and I'm used to it. And I think that it's a necessary component of keeping our courthouses safe. And so in my mind, I believe that our public schools should have similar systems in place. Now,
the State House in New Mexico, they've introduced measures to require gun safety classes for certain schools.
An act relating to public schools, requiring school districts and charter schools to provide annual firearm safety training, providing requirements for the training, assigning powers and duties to the Public Education Department and the Department of Public Safety. House Bill 324.
House Bill 324.
Meanwhile, in West Virginia, the West Virginian Senate, they're looking to allow for individuals who are 18 years old to 20 years old to carry concealed firearms.
Your Committee on the Judiciary has had under consideration Senate Bill 30, allowing 18 to 20-year-olds to carry concealed weapon without permit, and reports back to committee substitute for same, with the recommendation that the committee substitute do pass, respectfully submitted.
A lot of different things happening across the country in different state houses dealing with the Second Amendment and firearms possession in Maryland. The House there discussing waiting periods for firearms purchases, but allowing for police to have shorter waiting periods than their 7 to 9 day waiting period in Maryland.
This bill establishes an exemption for the sale, rental, or transfer of a regulated firearm from the 7-day required period after an application is executed when the purchaser, renter, or receiver of the regulated firearm is a law enforcement officer, an individual who retired as a law enforcement officer and in good standing from law enforcement agency, or an individual whom a permit to wear, carry, and transport a firearm has been issued.
In Tennessee, legislators grappling with the question of, do gun owners who live in rental properties still have the Second Amendment right? And that's a question that was brought up in that particular state.
This bill is intended to do one simple thing: ensure that tenants, whether residential or commercial, are not required to give up their ability to lawfully defend themselves inside the premises they lease and control. And although this bill was introduced last year, I've recently received several thoughtful comments and some very specific fact patterns that deserve a closer look, particularly to make sure that the bill is as tight and as clear as it should be.
Again, that's Tennessee House Representative Lee Reeves. He explained his bill, but he said he's willing to hold off on advancing that to get more input, and as he said, to make the bill even tighter. Meanwhile, in Kansas, a Kansas Senate staffer talked about a bill that would reduce the liability for federal firearms licensees, also known as licensed gun dealers.
The bill would provide immunity to the firearm licensee for any actions that arise out of returning that firearm to the owner of the firearm. So there would be no civil liability on the part of the federal firearms licensee for returning the firearm to its owner at the conclusion of that agreement. The bill does provide that the immunity doesn't apply to any unlawful actions on the part of the federal firearms licensee.
Always interesting to see the different patchwork of measures that state houses across the country are tackling when it comes to the Second Amendment and firearm possession. And that's America's Talking for Firearms Friday. From my studios in Central Illinois, I'm Greg Bishop. Be sure to join us Monday for more stories impacting you, the taxpayer, from all across the country, only right here with the Center Square Daily.